Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael Torres always understood the value of silence. At 38, he'd built a tech company from the ground up that, in less than a decade, became a national leader in digital security solutions. What few people knew, and his wife certainly wasn't among them, was that Michael remained the hidden majority shareholder, operating through a carefully structured holding company. He preferred the shadows. Always had. While other entrepreneurs flaunted imported cars and luxury watches, Michael drove an ordinary sedan, wore simple shirts, and avoided the spotlight at all costs. To him, money was a tool, not an identity. Patricia, his wife, was the exact opposite. At 35, she was a commercial director at a high-end consulting firm, driven by status, recognition, and a constant need for external validation. Everything about her had to shine: her car, her clothes, her jewelry, even her conversations at corporate dinners. She spoke loudly, laughed loudly, and took up space like someone claiming territory. And Michael, naturally reserved, had always been seen by her as the husband who couldn't keep up with her pace. In their 5 years of marriage, Patricia made a point of repeatedly emphasizing that they'd married under a strict separation of assets. "We each take care of our own," she'd say, with a smile that barely concealed her disdain. Michael accepted it without question, not because he agreed, but because he loved her. And when you love someone, you often give in where you shouldn't. To Patricia, he was just a mid-level investor, someone who worked from home with no visible major accomplishments. She never asked for details about his business. Never showed genuine curiosity. And Michael, tired of being underestimated, stopped offering explanations. If she didn't want to see him, he wasn't going to beg to be seen. On a Tuesday morning, Patricia walked into the kitchen radiant, wearing a flawless business suit, perfect makeup, and her hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She barely glanced at Michael, who was sitting at the table having coffee. "Today's the day," she announced with a wide smile. "I'm closing the biggest deal of my career. $150 million. 150, Michael. Can you even imagine?" He looked up, feigning mild interest. "Congratulations. Which company?" "That digital security one I mentioned, Secure Tech Solutions." Patricia grabbed a coffee cup and drank standing up, in a hurry. "It's huge. The negotiation's been going on for months, but we're finally signing today. Preston and I handled everything. It's going to be amazing." Michael's stomach tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Secure Tech Solutions. His company. The company he'd founded, built, and still quietly ran. And Patricia, after 5 years of marriage, had absolutely no idea. "Is Preston going too?" Michael asked, his voice calm. "Of course. He's my partner on this deal." Patricia checked her watch. "I've got to go. The meeting's at 10. She leaned in and gave him a quick, distracted kiss on the forehead. "Don't wait for me for lunch. We'll probably celebrate afterward." Michael just nodded. "Good luck." She hurried out, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume. Michael waited until the sound of her car faded into the distance. Then he got up, went upstairs to the bedroom, and opened the closet. At the very back, protected by a plastic bag, was his only business suit. He put it on slowly, straightened his tie, and slipped on leather shoes he rarely wore. He looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back was different from the one Patricia saw every day, the Michael she'd never wanted to know. He grabbed his car keys and the envelope prepared by the investigator, then left the house. The drive to Secure Tech's headquarters took 40 minutes. Michael parked in the executive garage, greeted the security guard who recognized him immediately, and went straight up to the 12th floor, where the main conference room was located. He arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time. Diane, the executive assistant, stood up as soon as she saw him. "Mr. Torres." We weren't expecting you today. Plans changed, Diane. I'll be joining the 10 o'clock meeting. She blinked, surprised, but quickly composed herself. Of course. I'll let the team know. Michael walked into the conference room and sat at the head of the table. He took a deep breath and checked his watch. 10 minutes to go. Meanwhile, downstairs, Patricia arrived with Preston. He was tall, with gray hair, an immaculate suit, and a confident smile. They chatted animatedly as they got on the elevator. You look stunning, Preston said, holding her hand a few seconds longer than necessary. Patricia smiled knowingly. Today's our day. When the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, Diane and two assistants greeted them. Coffee was offered, documents were handed out. Patricia politely greeted the CFO, the legal manager, and other executives already in the room. Everyone exchanged firm handshakes and confident smiles. She was carefully reviewing the papers, Preston by her side, when the conference room door opened. Michael walked in. Patricia looked up and froze. Her smile vanished. Her pen slipped from her fingers and hit the table. She blinked twice, as if trying to correct a glitch in her vision. Preston noticed her reaction and looked in the same direction, but didn't understand what was happening. Michael calmly walked to the head of the table, gave slight nods to those present, and sat down. Richard, the CFO, stood up and made the formal introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I'd like to introduce Michael Torres, our majority shareholder and founder of SecureTech Solutions. The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. Patricia stared at Michael as if he were a ghost. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide, her face slowly losing color. Preston, beside her, frowned in confusion. Wait, your husband is... She didn't answer. Couldn't. Michael opened the folder in front of him, adjusted the reading glasses he rarely wore, and began. Good morning, everyone. Let's get straight to the point. Please review Clause 7 of the contract. There are inconsistencies that need to be clarified before any signing. The meeting continued. Michael led it with surgical precision, pointing out flaws, asking technical questions, demonstrating absolute command over every comma in the contract. Patricia could barely speak. Every time she tried to contribute, her voice came out shaky and weak. Preston tried to step in, answering for her, but Michael politely cut him off. Sorry, Preston, but that question was directed to Mrs. Torres. And every time he said, Mrs. Torres, there was extra weight in his words, a subtle irony, nearly imperceptible to everyone else but devastating to Patricia. At one point, Michael turned directly to her. Patricia, in your initial proposal, you mentioned your team has expertise in implementing third-layer encryption protocols. Can you walk us through how you plan to structure that phase? She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried to stammer a response. Well, we have, the technical team will. Michael waited in silence. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The discomfort grew like a wave. Finally, he gave a slight nod and said, That's fine. We can revisit that point later. But everyone in the room knew there wouldn't be a later. Patricia had failed publicly, and worse, she'd failed in front of the very husband she'd always described as irrelevant. The meeting went on for another 40 minutes. Documents were reviewed, adjustments made, clauses debated. Then, just as everything seemed ready for signing, Michael leaned back in his chair, interlaced his fingers, and said calmly, Thank you all for being here and for your work so far. However, after a more detailed review, I've decided we won't be signing this contract today. The shock was immediate. Richard, the CFO, nearly choked on his coffee. Mr. Torres, but... Michael raised his hand, cutting him off. It's not a technical issue. It's a matter of trust. Unfortunately, We've identified inconsistencies in the conduct of certain individuals involved in this negotiation that make it impossible to move forward at this time." Patricia felt her blood run cold. Preston looked at her, confused and starting to get angry. Michael continued, his voice calm but firm. "Thank you all. The meeting is adjourned." One by one, the executives began to stand, exchanging uneasy glances. Richard tried to argue, but Michael just shook his head. "We'll talk later, Richard." Preston stood up, clearly furious but trying to keep his composure. He grabbed his folder and looked at Patricia, expecting her to follow, but Michael said, without looking up, "Patricia, you stay." Preston hesitated. "I can." "No," Michael cut in, finally lifting his eyes to meet Preston's. "This is between me and my wife." The word "wife" echoed through the room like a gunshot. Preston swallowed hard, glanced at Patricia once more, but she was frozen, unable to react. He left, closing the door behind him. Now it was just the two of them. Michael waited until the sound of footsteps in the hallway had completely disappeared. Then he opened the drawer beside him and pulled out a thick, sealed brown envelope. He placed it on the table and slowly pushed it toward her. Patricia stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. "Michael, what is this?" He didn't answer right away. He just watched her, silently, as if measuring every feature of her face, every micro-expression of fear. Finally, he said, "Open it." "Michael, Open it." With trembling hands, Patricia took the envelope. She opened it slowly. And when the first papers slid out, her world collapsed. Photos. Dozens of them. Patricia and Preston entering a hotel. Leaving a restaurant, holding hands. Sitting in a car, laughing, his face dangerously close to hers. Hotel reservation records. Printed WhatsApp messages, every word highlighted in yellow. Michael is so predictable. He has no fire. You make me feel alive. What Patricia didn't know was that Michael had been suspicious for weeks, and quietly hired a private investigator to follow her. The photos slipped from her hands and scattered across the table. Patricia covered her face and started to cry. "Michael. I can explain." "Explain," he said, his voice still calm but filled with a restrained pain that cut deeper than any shout. She sobbed, struggling to find words. "It was a mistake. I felt alone, you never paid attention to me." Michael leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I never paid attention to you? Me, the one who woke up early to make your coffee just how you like it? Me, the one who canceled plans whenever you needed company? Me, the one who listened for 5 years while you told me I wasn't enough, that I lacked ambition, that I couldn't keep up with you?" He laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, empty of joy. "I was right here, Patricia. The whole time. You just never wanted to see me." "Michael, please," she reached out, trying to touch his hand, but he pulled back. "You know what hurts the most?" he asked, his voice finally starting to crack. "It's not the betrayal. It's the contempt. For 5 years, you treated me like I was small. Like I didn't matter. You laughed at me behind my back, told your friends I was mediocre, that you deserved better. And I swallowed it. I swallowed it because I believed that one day, you'd really see me." Patricia was sobbing uncontrollably now, mascara running, hands shaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Michael stood up and straightened his jacket. "You always wanted total separation of assets, remember? You made a point of saying we each took care of our own. So that's exactly what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you'll receive the divorce papers. You won't take anything that's mine. And I don't want anything that's yours. Simple as that." "Michael, no, please, we can try." "Try what?" he interrupted, turning to face her one last time. Fix something you broke on purpose? You didn't betray me by accident, Patricia. You betrayed me because you thought I was insignificant. Because you thought I'd never find out. Because you thought that even if I did, I'd accept it. But you know what you didn't count on? He took a step toward the door. That the man you looked down on for 5 years was exactly the man you always wanted to be. He opened the door, but before leaving, turned one last time. And about that contract? Forget it. It's not happening. Not with you involved. Not after what I just found out. He paused. By the way, I think the consulting firm you work for will want to hear about this too. After all, extramarital affairs that interfere with $150 million deals tend to raise ethical issues, don't they? Patricia paled even more. You wouldn't. I won't do anything, Michael replied calmly. I don't need to. The truth has a way of coming out on its own, especially when you leave trails everywhere. And with that, without another word, he left. The door closed with a soft but final click. Patricia remained there alone in the empty conference room, surrounded by damning photos, scattered papers, and the crushing awareness that she'd lost everything: the $150 million contract, her marriage, her reputation, and worst of all, the man she'd never known how to value. Michael rode the elevator down in silence. When he reached the lobby, he felt the weight begin to lift from his shoulders. It wasn't complete relief, the pain was still there, deep and throbbing, but something new had emerged: clarity. For the first time in years, he no longer had to carry the burden of being invisible to someone who should have seen him better than anyone. He got into his car, started the engine, and before pulling out of the parking lot, looked one last time at the building. Up there, in the 12th floor conference room, he imagined Patricia still sitting, shattered, trying to process what had just happened. And for the first time, Michael felt no pity. He felt peace. He drove home with the radio off, only the sound of traffic in the background. When he arrived, he took off his suit, put on comfortable clothes, and sat down in his office. He opened his laptop and began outlining his next steps. He called his lawyer, scheduled meetings, organized documents. Every move was calculated, precise. There was no room for hesitation anymore. That night, Patricia didn't come home. Michael hadn't expected her to. She was probably at some hotel, or maybe at Preston's place, trying to understand how her life had crumbled in less than 2 hours. But Michael didn't care. That house, which had once been theirs, was now his alone, and he planned every detail of how to rebuild it without a trace of her. In the days that followed, the story began to circulate, quietly at first. Whispers in the hallways of Patricia's consulting firm. Strange looks during meetings. Until, inevitably, someone asked. And once the questions started, the answers came too. The company's ethics committee launched an internal investigation. Patricia was called in for explanations. So was Preston. The pressure built like a pot about to boil over. Michael didn't lift a finger to speed things up. He didn't need to. The truth, as he'd said, has a way of revealing itself. And when it did, it was brutal. Patricia was temporarily suspended while the investigation continued. Preston, married with 2 children, watched his reputation collapse. His wife filed for divorce. The firm where he worked as a senior consultant terminated his contracts. Michael observed it all from a distance, without interfering, without celebrating. He simply noted, mentally, how choices have consequences. How words spoken in moments of arrogance return like sharp boomerangs. How underestimating someone can be the biggest mistake a person ever makes. 3 weeks after the disastrous meeting, Patricia tried to get in touch. Calls went unanswered. Messages vanished into the void. Until one Saturday morning, she showed up at the front door. Michael opened it but didn't invite her in. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for her to speak. Patricia looked different, her hair hastily tied back, no makeup, deep dark circles under her eyes. "Michael, please. I just want to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I know I messed up. I know I was awful. But, we've had 5 years together. It can't end like this." Michael sighed, exhausted. "Patricia, it ended the moment you chose another man. It ended every time you humiliated me in front of your friends. It ended when you decided I wasn't enough without ever asking who I really was." He paused. "You never wanted to know me. You just wanted someone to serve you. And I don't serve anymore." She started to cry, but he didn't give in. There was no room left for compassion, not here, not with her. "The divorce papers have already been sent. You have 10 days to respond. After that, we never need to see each other again. Michael. Goodbye, Patricia." He closed the door. And this time, it was different. There was no doubt, no weight, just the certainty that he'd made the right choice. 6 months later, Michael's life was completely different. The divorce had been finalized without complications. Patricia didn't contest anything, maybe out of shame, maybe because she knew she had no grounds. She left town not long after, accepting a lower-level position at another company, far from judgmental eyes. Preston lost his family and career. He tried to rebuild, but the stain remained. Once trust is publicly broken, it's nearly impossible to restore. Michael, on the other hand, found a peace he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't fully healed, deep wounds take time, but he'd learned something essential: he would never again let anyone make him feel small. He would never again accept emotional crumbs from someone who should have offered a feast of respect. And on a quiet Sunday afternoon, as he sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, he thought of Patricia, not with anger, not with longing, just with the awareness that some people come into our lives to teach us what not to accept. And that sometimes, the greatest victory isn't destroying the person who hurt you, it's simply moving forward, stronger, more aware, and infinitely more whole. Michael smiled to himself, raised his cup in a silent toast, and whispered, almost to himself, "Thank you for showing me who I really am, even if you didn't mean to." And then he turned the page, literally. He picked up the book he'd been reading, settled into his chair, and dove into another story, one where he wasn't a supporting character. One where he was, finally, the protagonist of his own life. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.